Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Perry to Gar. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it! Into Booker. Here's the three. Suzanne! Another Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Bravo time! He got it! Suzanne! Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a podcast about the NBA and the Phoenix Suns. My name is Max McCulley, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host. His name is David Nash. David, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good under the circumstances, Max, but we're back pretty quickly this week, which is probably not a bad idea with the trade deadline approaching. But yeah, I say in the context because we're jumping straight on after the OKC loss, and we just can't catch a break with these recently. We seem to always record directly after or during a Suns loss at the moment, Max.
We really do. Yeah, we had 2 games this week only. It was a weird week. We had the amazing Dallas game, possibly the best game of the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had the OKC game, which was an apocalypse, but not the greatest apocalypse of the season so far. David, do you know what that was?
I reckon it was probably Devin Booker being snubbed from the All-Star game, Max. What do you think?
He was snubbed very hard, David. What do you think? Should we do a recap first? Do you want to dive right into Devin Booker's insane snub?
Let's not bury the lead here before we jump into the recap. We can get to that slightly after with some good news and some bad news with matches this week, or games, I should say. But it's the big news of the week. Devin Booker was snubbed from the All-Star teams, and I wanted to get your thoughts first and foremost on this one, I think, Max.
Well, I do have thoughts, David. I don't need to throw all the stats at our listeners. They've all seen how he measured up against, the literal legends in traditional stats.
Mm-hmm.
The nerds among them have seen how he deserved to make the team based on, VORPs, BPMs, PIPMs, BIPMs, DORPs, all that shit. All the alphabet soup. You all watch Devin Booker play. You know what he is. You know how important he is to the Suns. But the people who are controlling this discourse, they obviously aren't watching him play. They're relying on tropes like, he needs to win first. But, is Brandon Ingram winning? No. Booker had a better record than Brandon Ingram.
Yep.
Brandon Ingram's on national TV a lot, though. Trae Young, is he winning?
Nope.
Not even close. One of the worst teams in the league. But the NBA Twitter account seemed to enjoy spreading his highlights. He gets a lot of clicks. And this goes beyond the stupid All-Star game, David. You have Kyle Kuzma getting talked about like one of the best trade candidates by shows like First Take.
Yep.
Kyle Kuzma sucks, David. But he plays for the Los Angeles Lakers. He'd be a goddamned afterthought if he played for the Phoenix Suns. And if Devin Booker played for the Los Angeles Lakers, he would probably be starting the fucking All-Star game. So don't tell me it's about winning. It's not about winning, David. It's not about that because Booker's losing out to better players. This is about one thing, David. The one thing is this. Devin Booker plays for the Phoenix Suns, David.
Yep. That's really what it boils down to right now. And, a lot of these conversations, I was out on, Devin Booker debates on Twitter and things probably over 12 months ago because, I essentially came to the conclusion that you just can't win these debates, at least in the heads of the people that you're talking to, because it is the Phoenix Suns. And until the Phoenix Suns are putting a 500 basketball team, whether that's got anything to do with Devin Booker or not, which, hint, hint, guys, it doesn't at the moment. He was very, very deserving of an All-Star nomination this year round, particularly with certain names out of consideration due to health and things. So, yeah, the goalpost changed. This is just the latest microcosm of it, I think, Max. We've seen it throughout Devin Booker's entire career. The goalposts shift as he breaks them down. And as soon as one theory is disproven, then we've got another one to contend with. And it's just the latest setback, I suppose, in Devin Booker's career and the Phoenix Suns overall, which for the most part, I don't give a shit about. I would have watched the All-Star game this year if Devin Booker's in it. Maybe he still makes it as an injury replacement and I tune in. But I don't really care about that. It's more when I see Devin Booker's reaction to it, really. I think it's one of the first times we've really seen him disappointed with a result of something that we've all been hyperbolic about. In the past, we've kind of overreacted to certain things that probably weren't even on Devin Booker's radar, but this one very much is. He was clearly upset about it, and what else more can you say about it, Max? It's just unfortunate. I made the case a couple of episodes ago, and I still think it's true to this day. I don't think he wins out on the discussion, but I think it's a much more interesting debate talking about him versus Damian Lillard for the first guard spot compared to him not making the All-Star game at all. So, I'm pretty clear on this one. He should have been one of the first guys picked in the reserves, not on the outside looking in, Max.
No, I absolutely agree with you. It's really not about the game itself. Like, who cares about watching the All-Star game? It sucks. I mean, they're trying to change it this year. Maybe it'll make it better.
Yep.
But the NBA All-Star game, more than any other sport, matters in terms of like what your label is as a player. Like, being called an NBA All-Star actually matters. Mm-hmm. Not to cite, the late Kobe Bryant, but the fact that you can call him an 18-time NBA All-Star, like, that's a huge deal. It's a really important thing. And not that Booker was ever going to be an 18-time All-Star, but he could have been above, the 8 to 10 range of All-Star games. And, losing this one matters. I think that matters to somebody's career legacy. And it's just unfortunate that it's come down to the point where it's just so clearly political. And I think Mark Bartelstein put it the best. He's the agent for Bradley Beal,
yep,
who also had a ridiculous snub in the All-Star game. He made just the eloquent and amazing point that, look, Bradley Beal did what many superstar-ish players don't do. He stayed with his team that was kind of not that good.
Yep.
And what is the reward he's gotten from the NBA coaches? The reward has been to be ignored for the All-Star game. It's like, what are we trying to do here, NBA and NBA's partners? And I think what the answer we're getting very loud and resoundingly is this. It's that they want the super teams. They want the players to leave the teams like the Phoenix Suns and the Washington Wizards. They want Devin Booker to go to the Lakers or somewhere else like that. And of course they do for money reasons, but you would wish they would maybe not make it so transparent. But I don't know, David. At the end of the day, it leaves me very cold and a little angry at the NBA right now, if you can't tell from my tone.
Yep. I'm not sure whether it was an official NBA account or somebody else today, but there was already, some marketing around the All-Star game with all the duos in the All-Star game, which leads very much to your point. And, there's some questionable names on there over Devin Booker. You've got Donovan Mitchell making up a duo with Rudy Gobert. You've got Russell Westbrook, just to name one more that got in over Devin Booker right now, making up a duo for Houston with James Harden. So they certainly like it this way. It's easier to market. You'd think they'd be all about sharing it a little bit more and marketing across the board, but we're missing something on that front, I guess, Max. But I can't help but think the loss to OKC today, I think that makes us 11-22 versus Western Conference teams, which, worth noting. I think we're much obviously better than that overall against the East, but the East coaches, because they theoretically don't see as much of the West players, don't actually decide on the West All-Stars. They only vote in their own conference. So maybe that overall record hurt Devin Booker a little bit, even though our overall record for the season is much better than that. And I went straight to the Goran Dragic season where he missed out on All-Star and made All-NBA third team, which very much on the back of the Suns finishing the year very well. If you actually, Scott Howard tweeted this at me, I believe. I hope I'm getting that credit right. But, his stats basically didn't change for the whole season, yet he was not an All-Star and snuck into the All-NBA third team. So that's going to be interesting.
I don't know, did you see my response to Scott Howard on that one for the reason why, David?
I did not.
It is because there are different people who vote on those different things. People who don't pay attention vote on the All-Star game. That's the coaches. Mm-hmm. And people who actually do kind of pay a little bit of attention. The media does actually sort of try to look into this, and they voted for Dragic.
Yeah, I think I just had way too much faith in the coaches this time around. I actually thought they'd be a better resource to count on for Devin Booker versus the broadcast teams and media members that vote for a portion of the All-Star with the fan vote, and the players, but also, as you said, vote on those end of season awards. But we should probably get into the recap, which will top things off here with Devin Booker. And the fact that if they don't pick up more wins, he's not going to get in those conversations going forward, I don't think, Max.
No, I mean, obviously not. And listen, he doesn't deserve to be an All-NBA player if his team doesn't make the playoffs. I do think All-NBA is something that you should judge on the whole season, but you really can't hold being 2.5 games out of the 8th seed against Devin Booker, especially when you're putting in Trae Young as a starter and Brandon Ingram on the team with a worse record. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and those games missed, the games lost. Really, it's hard to pin that on Devin Booker. I mean, DeAndre Ayton has been, I would argue, kind of a revelation this season. He's been up and down, but he's been much better than last season. But as many people have pointed out on Twitter, like that 25-game suspension has probably been the difference between Devin Booker making the All-Star team and not making the All-Star team. And when you consider that, you just got to look at what happened to be like, well, that's just wrong. As Devin Booker said when he was asked today, how would you fix the process? He would say, well, maybe just put the best players in the game.
It's a pretty simple answer, isn't it, Max?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Phoenix Suns are 20-28 after 48 games in the NBA, Max. And as we said, just the 2 games before we recorded this week, the great win over Dallas at their place, 133-104. The man of the moment, Devin Booker, had 32, 6, 9, and 2, and was 12 of 20 from the field in that one. And the man you just mentioned, DeAndre Ayton, had 31, 9, 1, 2, and 1, and went a very efficient 13 of 15 from the field. And we just watched the Suns, I don't know if we could put it out any other way, Max. They capitulated against the OKC Thunder at home, 107 versus 111. Book had 27 and 5. Ayton had 16 and 6. And Kelly probably kept us in it and had us in the lead for a large portion of that fourth quarter with 27, 12, and 2, and was 4 and 8 from the 3-point line, Max. But to round the recap out, as we always do, 3rd in the division at the moment, 2 games ahead of Sacramento, 13 behind the Clippers, 11th in the conference, only half a game ahead of the New Orleans Pelicans now, and 3.5 games back of that 8th spot. And sitting where we were last week, 20th in the NBA overall, sandwiched between Portland and the New Orleans Pelicans. But shall we go straight to the leaderboard and maybe talk about these couple of games a little bit more through that lens before we move on to our mock trade deadline, I should say, Max?
Yeah, let's do that. We should point out that we are going to do a mock trade deadline. I'm not even sure we said that yet.
I don't think so.
That is what we're going to be doing. That is on, what is it? I think it's Thursday in the United States, Friday in Australia. So that'll be fun. Excited for the trade deadline. It seems like it might be a lukewarm this year, but it's always fun to get excited for those trades at 3 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. But yeah, let's do the leaderboard. Because David, one of these 2 games, the Suns actually won by a lot of points.
They did.
Against Dallas. And that was fun. So we should enjoy that. So it's actually funny, David. I haven't looked at this again. I started my leaderboard before halftime of the OKC game, and things changed a little bit, so I have to kind of go on the fly here, but I'm just going to first of all, Devin Booker deserves a 5-star anyway, but also just as a FU to everybody, I mean, I'm giving him the 5-star, David.
Yep, and I'm giving him the 5-star too. Clearly the best player in both games and big in the win, and we're just doing the Dallas and OKC games to remind the listeners when they send their votes in. So no arguments from me, and we've talked a lot about Devin Booker already, so I will throw to you for your 4 votes.
Next one's tough. It really is. I think because of how good he was in the OKC game, especially the second half, I'm going to slightly give it to Kelly Oubre, David.
Yep, we're together on this one again. I really wanted to go the guy that I'll have next as my 3 votes, and I'm guessing you had 2, particularly because I tend to prioritize winning. But Kelly was just so good in that OKC game and better in the Dallas game versus how Ayton was in this OKC one. So I think over both games and keeping us in the OKC one, I've got to go Kelly this week for 4 votes, Max.
Yep, and you just said the name of the 3-star player. I probably would have given him the 5-star if this were just about the Dallas game, although Booker was really good in that game too. It's DeAndre Ayton, David.
He was great on both ends, we should probably point out, which is how he's going to get 5 stars over Devin Booker some weeks, hopefully for the rest of the season, I think, because him and another guy that will hopefully be in both of our leaderboards, I'm guessing, Max, were just crucial against Luka Doncic in the Dallas win. I tried to outline that with a few videos on Twitter during the week. I just thought the Suns' game plan was perfect for Luka. They got a little bit lucky with some missed shots, but Mikal and Ayton really saw that game plan out. Disappointing to see him, I guess, fall back down against the OKC Thunder and a big opponent in Steven Adams. But as we've said all year, that's just the story of DeAndre Ayton at the moment. And I know you pointed it out again today during the Thunder match. We just have to, look at the baseline more rather than these highs and lows with DeAndre Ayton, because that's probably what's going to see us through in the end with what he's going to be as a consistent player that you can count on, Max.
Yep, absolutely. And I will point out that Ayton did make some pretty good plays towards the end of the OKC game in the fourth quarter. He had one stretch with a block and a really nice, he kind of called for the ball with Rubio down low.
Had the seal.
Yep.
Had the
exactly,
seal.
Had the seal. And that is something he didn't do last year. He didn't suck and then become good and have one of the bigger stretches of the game. And that's progress, and that's what we're trying to see from Ayton. So I absolutely agree. Overall, encouraged with him for sure. You mentioned my guy at number 2. He was bad on the offensive end in the OKC game for the most part, but Mikal Bridges deserves it just for what he did in the Dallas game. And still, defensively, he's consistent as hell.
Yeah, and if the Suns don't make a trade, like we're going to get to a little bit later, and other role players can't step up, I think Mikal's going to just continue to get in these 2, 3, maybe 1 vote some weeks purely based on the defense that he brings. Because, again, to double down on it, in the Dallas game in particular against Luka, who was the guy that they needed to stop, I just thought he was huge. And, Monty sat him for a lot of the Thunder one today, but brought him in with the other starters down the stretch. Unfortunately, they couldn't bring it out and maybe should have left in the guy that I've got at number 1, but I wanted to, I'm guessing here, but I wanted to give you the spotlight. I actually wanted to try and give it to my 1 vote to a different player, just so you could have the 100% spotlight on this guy, but I couldn't. I had to put him in here, but I'll let you announce it for the listeners if I'm right.
No, David, I want to hear you talk about him.
Tiger Rome deserves wholeheartedly the 1 star for the week because he had 12 points against Dallas and really came on in that game. The OKC game, he only had 9 points, Max, but I thought, and this is probably why counting stats don't mean everything, I think he was better in the second game of the 2 that we're talking about, even though I was still quite impressed with him in that Dallas game. And as I said, there was no one else, but that shouldn't take credit away from him. I think he deserves to be in here. And as I look at the leaderboard, I'm guessing this might be the first time. Yep, he is on 0 votes from all of our listeners so far. So this is Ty Jerome or Tiger Rome's debut in the 7 seconds or less leaderboard for the year. Please rave on about your boy, Max.
Well, he gets 2 votes then for the whole year so far because I'm also giving my vote to Ty Jerome. I agree with you. It's just... And also, he would have had more points than if he didn't have 2 shots rim out. He had the 3-pointer.
Yep.
And also the one, that little fadeaway in the lane there. And listen, the confidence, you can just see it with him. And it's always been about that with him. And that's why, listen, I thought he was bad earlier too because he was bad. He was terrible. But you can't really expect a guy who comes off a month and a half injury into the season, who's a rookie who, let's be honest, isn't like an athletic guy who's going to really take to the NBA speed of the game right away.
Yeah,
it was going to take him a little bit, and he's really, really smart. So he's figured it out faster than I think most of us would. And I don't want to say that he's fully figured it out yet. There's still a good chance he's going to have his struggles going forward, but you can see why Ty Jerome has a future in the league, at least in my opinion. It's just that the intelligence is there on both ends. Even though he's not athletic, even on defense, he makes plays. He had a rebound over Steven Adams, David. I don't know if you saw that. Or maybe saying over Steven Adams is a little far. but
I had a mental image of him piggybacking Steven Adams, grabbing the ball over him, but it wasn't quite like that.
Other guards wouldn't have gotten it. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. He at least positioned his body well enough to get it. He just knows how to play basketball, and I think he's starting to figure it out enough where he can show that off. And he's even making plays that you wouldn't even expect from him, like that layup that he had in the fourth quarter, where he just drove by kind of everybody. That's kind of the thing about him is people don't expect him to go by them, so he takes advantage of that. He's just smarter than everybody else. He sees a step ahead, and he needs to keep doing that, and that's how he's going to succeed. I do want to say though, David, I was tempted to give my 1-star vote to Jalen McHugh. Did you see that dunk?
You know what? I didn't end up writing it down, but I had the exact same thought. 2 dunks, actually. I think you may have missed the first one, or
no, I saw it. I didn't see that one.
The second one was
the second one was insane.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't, you should definitely check him out. The first one's stuck picking up his dribble off the backboard number, and the second one is one that any normal human being would just reverse layup, but he somehow turned it into a reverse dunk. Unfortunately, if you look at the score in the game, the Suns, or the Naz Suns, were well out of it, which has been the theme of their entire season if you've been following along in the G League. But he's showing signs, Max, and yeah, I had a similar thought. If Ty didn't step up in the 2 games this week, we might have cheekily put Jalen LeCue in that 1-star slot. But what was your favorite highlight from Ty? In the 2 games. I think you just mentioned mine. I just think the OKC guards were really pressuring him full court, which we saw him really struggle with early on when they handed the backup point guard duties to him, and he really struggled. But this time he just looked ultra confident, never picked up the dribble, gave it off a couple of times if he felt like he wasn't going to be able to get by guys. But that one time in particular, he just took Schroeder the whole way and got the layup because everyone else was, guarding their men. And I just thought that was a great sign for his future.
Yeah, if you're talking about what trait I like the most from Ty Jerome, I agree with you. It's just the overall confidence, especially dribbling the ball.
Yeah.
But just talking about one highlight for me, it's the entry pass to DeAndre Ayton.
Yes.
It was just gorgeous, and it really stuck out given how bad our guards have been over the past 5 years at entry passes. Mm-hmm. And it was just goddamn perfect. Ayton caught it easily, laid it in. Like, that's what we've been waiting for. That's what a lot of people on Twitter who blamed Igor for the inability to get Ayton the ball. I think you probably enjoyed that as much as I did, even though I'm the Ty Jerome guy. Just seeing a guard actually get in the ball. It's not the coaching's fault, guys. It's just, it's an execution thing.
Yeah, and didn't throw it on the first look. Really waited until Ayton knew exactly what he was going to do, and that's what we didn't see last year. We either saw panic passes that turned into turnovers because not everyone was on the same page, or no passes at all where they deferred to someone else because they just weren't confident making the decision. And yeah, as much as we get on coaches, and I'm a little bit critical of Monty, not pulling the right reins in this Thunder game and allowing them to go on the 11-0 run or whatever it is to lose the game. But at the end of the day, the players are the ones that have to do the job, and the coaches can only do so much. So great signs from Ty, which gives us a little bit of a positive, I suppose, from that Thunder game where there was mostly disappointment at the end of it, I suppose, which just goes to show how much, ends up on that, whether it's a W or an L at the end, because we might be talking about Kelly a little bit more in his performance, or, the bench stepping up. I was, really happy initially for Tyler Johnson, and then gutted for him that he seemed to go back into the locker room with a knee issue or something like that, because it was probably the best game he played all season as well. So there were some positives to take, but overall it would have been much better to go 2-0 for this week, Max. But I should round out the leaderboard stuff. Book, Oubre, Rubio, Saric, and Baines are still the top 5, but Mikhail is up to 6th and Ayton is up to 7th. So my question for you is, where do those 2 guys, and it might be down to trades and things like that with guys in the top 5 currently, where do those 2 guys end up at the end of the year, considering we're still got a little bit under halfway to go, so a lot of games to get votes?
Can you give me how many votes they're down right now behind the second and third place guys?
I sure can. So Mikhail's on 231 and DeAndre Ayton is on 182. And you've got Baines about 60 votes ahead of Mikhail. Saric very much similar to that, only 10 more. And then you've got a real leap. So Ricky Rubio's 626. Kelly Oubre is 737. So they'd be, probably hard-pressed to crack the top 3, but you never know.
Yeah, I think Ayton will be 4th and Mikhail will be 5th probably. That's probably the safest way to go, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think just...
I do want to say real quick that you brought him up, Tyler Johnson. He was in contention for that 1-star spot before he went out with that injury. He actually was really playing well.
I was just happy for him because, he's just ultimate professional, ultimate team guy. And I just, I know I'm a little bit biased with the guys that I really love, but he just cops some really undue slack or flack, I should say, from people on Twitter just, for having some bad games, which, he's not a star. So it was just good to see him bounce back, and it would have been more happy for him if we got the win and he was, I guess, able to see it out. I think he actually came back for Devin when he fouled out, so that was at least a positive sign that he wasn't, injured enough to be taken out of the game entirely, Max.
Well, it's nice to hear you defend your guy, and I know you're not about to trade him 7 times in the next segment.
Yeah, that's the really interesting thing. Who knows how many more games he's got for the Phoenix Suns, but I've enjoyed his time while he's been on the team just because he is such a team guy, and we should let off some of these guys sometimes. But we're still missing some votes from Week 13. I'll remind the listeners that's the 2 Spurs games, Pacers and Memphis, and just as another reminder, this week is just Dallas and OKC, which means we might have a huge Week 15. We've got a couple of back-to-backs coming up this week, so there might be up to 5 games before we record next, Max, maybe plus some trades to talk. So we're looking at a pretty big episode next timed up, I think. But we've discussed the games enough, but I guess before we move on entirely, what's your current, I guess, gut check on the team? They really need to inject some new talent into this team to have a strong finish to the year, or are we already trending in the right direction? I'm feeling, other than the loss today, quite positive that they've turned at least a little bit of a corner, particularly with some duress with some guys missing through injury and things. What's your gut feel on this team right now?
Well, David, we beat the crap out of the Mavericks, one of the better teams in the league, when they had Luka, obviously. We barely lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder because we just kind of screwed up at the end. Some officiating chicanery, but mostly our own fault. But OKC's very good. I feel very good, very positive. I tweeted about a month ago that it's dumb to hold your hopes on the playoffs right now for the Suns. This really shouldn't be the goal. Listen, we all got really excited with the 7-4 start. Of course we did. That was exciting. But this isn't really not a playoff team. And the fact that Ayton's come in and has looked so much better, the fact that Mikal is showing signs, now Ty Jerome's showing signs.
Yep.
Booker obviously is taking a leap from last year. We really should be happy with what we're seeing. There's really no reason not to be. So at this point, the progress is what we should be hoping for. They're definitely not going to be as bad as they were last year. They're already better than they were last year, win-wise.
Yep.
They're going to finish with 30 wins, at least. I think we need to be happy with where we are. I think we need to just look at the progress and just not focus on these, here's the thing. If we would have, randomly stolen the ball with 10 seconds left in this game and hit a 3 to win the game, and we would have won today, everyone on Suns Twitter would have gone crazy. You and I would be way happier on this podcast. But Guess what? We still wouldn't make the playoffs. It wouldn't have mattered for anything. So we really should just take sort of a more wide, broad perspective on this season and just realize that things are generally trending well, and we should probably be happy with that.
Yeah, I've really come around on this and said just as much this week. I feel very similar and have been trying to preach your word, so to speak, I think, Max, because you've been a lot more consistent on me. I've probably fallen into the trap of getting excited about the playoffs and things and watching how many games back from the 8th seed that we are. But, I'll say it again to anyone listening that's feeling a little bit glum about this situation and the playoffs. If you look at this team and watch the games through a lens of just the development and forget about the wins and losses and how it impacts where we are in the standings, it's actually really enjoyable to watch, guys. I'm not kidding you. I wouldn't bullshit you. If you just try it, I think you'll be really surprised because Ayton's progression is awesome. Watching Devin Booker just be amazing night in and night out is awesome. Seeing Mikal, Ty Jerome, as we talked about, those kind of younger guys. Hopefully Cam comes back and has some games. Kelly continually proving that he can potentially be a third guy who's still quite young. It is actually really enjoyable to see it. And I think the Dallas game is the perfect example of that. Say that came just after the trade deadline and we'd made a couple of short-term moves to bring some vets in or something, and they won that Dallas game on the back of, a couple of Trevor Ariza types. We'd probably be excited, but how much more exciting is it when, it was basically your 3 core players plus Kelly Oubre that got you that win and blew Dallas off the court. That's a window into the future, and that's going to be so much more than, sneaking into an 8 seed and getting swept by the Lakers or something, I think, Max.
Yep, you're 100% right. And the fact that the Suns have finally committed to a coach, I mean, we can debate the merits and the cons of Monty Williams, but just his ability, the 5-year contract, like they're going to just try to grow this. They're going to do their best to build around Booker and Ayton, who's actually shown to be. And listen, I know everyone was excited about the 16-10 last season with Ayton. It didn't mean anything. Like, it was fine. It was cool. But, like, now he's actually showing legitimate growth on defense.
Yep.
He's showing he can actually be an anchor as a 5. Like, now is the time to be excited about DeAndre Ayton. He's showing he can be a real core to build around. Mikal Bridges, same thing. Mikal Bridges is, like, one of the best winning defenders in the league by a lot of advanced metrics. There's a lot to be excited about. Like, this team is actually starting to build around the players that matter. And that's really all that I could tell to Suns fans who are, in despondent right now. Mm-hmm. And I get it. I mean, I was yelling on Twitter about the NBA refs. I'm upset with the NBA right now. I'm actually not upset with the Suns, though. I'm probably the happiest I've been with the Suns in many years.
Me too. Me too, Max.
All right. How about Did You Know, David? Are we ready for it before we do our trade thing?
Well, Max, we're up to episode 77 and just talked about Devin Booker missing out on the All-Star game, but you know who wears number 77 and just got his first All-Star appearance?
Am I allowed to mention him on this podcast?
That's right, Luka Doncic. But don't sweat it, listeners. You don't have to turn off. I'm not going to put you through a Luka love fest for Did You Know this week. I instead want to focus on the Phoenix Suns history like we always do. So, Max, did you know the Phoenix Suns have had 23 players make All-Star games across 62 separate selections and over 37 different seasons? That's right, Devin Booker was set to make it number 24 for the Suns in what could have possibly been yet another hat tip to Kobe Bryant the week of his passing. Quick side note for all the listeners, Max, this week following Kobe's death, Booker took 24 shots against the Grizzlies, and then in the second game against Dallas, he had 32 points, which is obviously 24 plus 8, the two numbers that he wore. But back to the Suns All-Stars, Max. I'm going to set your goal here at 7 in a true 7 seconds or less fashion. Can you give me 7 Suns All-Stars in 7 seconds or less?
Booker, Barkley, Stoudemire, Marion, Westphal, Davis, Johnson. Is that 7?
Well, you said Booker, which I'm guessing you meant someone else at the start, not Devin Booker.
Oh, yeah, I definitely didn't mean Booker. Did I say Nash? I may have been Nash. Or Barkley?
No.
I may have been Barkley, then.
I think you meant Nash, and you easily got to 7 in 7 seconds there. So in order of most recent appearance, Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire, Shaquille O'Neal, Sean Marion, Stephon Marbury, who you mentioned, Jason Kidd, all back from now until the year 2000. Charles Barkley, who you also said, Dan Marley, Kevin Johnson, Tom Chambers, Jeff Hornacek in the 90s, Walter Davis, Larry Nance, Maurice Lucas, Dennis Johnson, Truck Robinson, who I love, carried the 80s for the Suns. And another guy you mentioned, I believe, Paul Westphal, Alvin Adams, Charlie Scott, Connie Hawkins, Paul Silas, Dick Van Arsdale, Gail Goodrich were the Suns' representatives in the early days of the franchise in the 60s and 70s. But Max, with just 23 players over 62 selections, we of course have many multi-time All-Stars wearing the purple and orange. In fact, 9 of the 23 were only selected once for the Suns, with the other 14 appearing at least twice. So next question for you. Give me one of the 2 ex-Suns with the most All-Star appearances repping the Phoenix Suns, and how many do you think it is?
The absolute most. Walter Davis was good for a very long time.
That's one. Maybe you can name both of them for bonus points.
Nash?
Yep, on the money. They both.
Okay.
They both had how
6?
many each?
6.
You have swept the table with that one. Very, very good on you. And a follow-up question with a small clue, given I listed them all for you before, so I hope you were listening. Can you give me one of the 9 one-time All-Stars for the Phoenix Suns?
One of the 9 one. Did Shaq make it once?
You are on the money again, on a roll. You could have chosen any one of Paul Silas in 71-72, Truck Robinson in 80-81, Shaq, who you did choose in 08-09, Larry Nance 84-85, Stephon Marbury 02-03, Maurice Lucas 82-83, Hornacek 91-92, Gail Goodrich 68-69, or Alvin Adams 75-76. Now to finish for you, Max, and the listeners, as I mentioned earlier, we are in fact up to episode 77 this week for the podcast. So what happened in 1977 when it came to the All-Star theme and Suns-themed folklore? Well, two things over two different seasons, I believe. In early 1977, part of the 76-77 season, Often Did You Know segment mentioned Paul Westphal was in his 5th season and given his first All-Star nod for the Phoenix Suns. Westphal was the lone All-Star Sun in that year who averaged 21.3 points on 51% shooting and with a PER of 21.4. Max, Devin Booker is also in his 5th season, averaging much higher at 27.1 points per game when I wrote this, but believe it or not, was also shooting 51% when I wrote it, and with just a 0.1 difference in PER with 21.5 currently. So we may need the luck of an injury replacement like we mentioned before for Booker, but it's in the 7 seconds or less signals that he may make his All-Star game for the first time in his 5th season, I should say. And even more so because Westphal was joined the following year by his sidekick Walter Davis, and they went on to be selected together 3 years in a row for the Suns. One can only dream about the two guys I'm thinking about, right, Max?
One can only dream, David.
But I mentioned two things happened in 77, Max, and I'll leave this final fun tidbit before signing off on Did You Know for this week. In the 77-78 season, where Westphal became a 2-time All-Star, the NBA held a horse competition, but it wasn't the failed horse comp we saw at All-Star Weekend in 08 and 09. Not sure if you or the listeners remember that flop, Max. Another quick side note, Kevin Durant, surprise, surprise, won both of those competitions. This competition was held in Atlanta in 77-78 over the All-Star Weekend and included 31 participants. That's it, you heard me right, 31. Paul Westphal joined the likes of Rick Barry, Rudy Tomjanovich, Pete Maravich, Bob McAdoo, Lionel Hollins, George Gervin for the round-robin tournament of horse where basically anything was allowed. Westphal took out Lionel Hollins in round 1, Cazzie Russell in round 2, John Williamson in round 3, Maurice Lucas, one-time Sun, in round 4, and the championship game was between him and Pistol Pete Maravich, which Paul Westphal won by forfeit because Maravich had a knee injury and couldn't compete. So to end, Max, I know everyone is listening wondering why it only lasted 1 year. To that I say jump on YouTube, find one of the few tapes of the matches online. Unfortunately, you can't find Paul Westphal one, but watch for 5 minutes and you'll probably understand why it only lasted 1 year. But that's it, Max. Time to jump into one of our favorite things to do on this podcast, and that is, whenever we get a chance, trying to do some mock GM type stuff.
I'm excited to go to that, David. Usually when you do the like the Did You Know stuff, I've at least vaguely heard of the thing you're talking about. I have not vaguely heard of the thing you ended with there.
I think a few people might be in the same boat, and I was too before I stumbled across it in 1977. So, as I said, a few of them are on YouTube, so go check them out, guys. It's pretty funny to watch.
The other thought that I've had that was kind of funny was the Devin Booker thing when you mentioned his stats on the season and after that, before the OKC game.
Yep.
He had 27 points tonight and shot 50% from the field.
You gotta love it. Gotta love it.
He's probably gonna say around the same stats. I just like guess.
Perfect.
Yes, we're gonna do the mock GM thing. We've done this a couple of times. We've done it for free agency. I don't know have we done it for the trade deadline before, David?
I don't know. I think we've definitely done a trade deadline one, but I don't think we did the mock theme that we love to do. So it might be a first time.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So we're both going to play the GM of the Suns here for just a little minute. I can make the trade we'd probably make. To be honest, for me, David, this trade deadline, I'd probably stand pat. But for the purposes of the podcast, it's kind of boring, so I'm going to do something.
Good to hear. Do you want to take?
Yes.
You can take the lead then.
Okay, sure. So, I went through a few of these, and there's a lot that I like. My favorite one, if I thought Washington would do it, would be to go get Ish Smith and Davis Bertans, but I just don't think that's possible.
Yep.
So I think I'm going to call Chicago real quick and go after the thing I think we need the most, although Ty Jerome is trying to convince me we don't. I think we need Tomas Satoransky really badly on this team.
Yep.
I just think he'd help a lot. He's got a good contract. We could have him the next year, and then his third year we could cut him for $5 million. So if we wanted to make a big acquisition, we could get him. He's also very tradable, so if we needed to move him, we could. So I'm going to go to the third guard. I'm going more expensive than we usually go in. I'm calling Chicago.
Hang on, Max.
Yeah.
Which dumb front office member of the Chicago Bulls do you want to call and hopefully swindle on a trade? Who am I playing here?
I mean, there's two of them. Do I go Gar or do I go Pax? I'm going to go with Gar.
All right, I'm on the line as Gar. What are we offering?
By the way, I'm calling Gar because I've heard Bill Simmons once saw him on a plane and he slept the whole time for like 5 hours in the middle of the day. And he thought that was very interesting for an NBA GM. All right, Gar. So, man, Sato, it's not working out for you very well this season, I would say. We have a few young guys, and I think I'm going to make some Suns fans mad here, but I'm starting to get less beholden to young guys. I think, like, you know, a guy like Cam Johnson could be available here if you're interested in something like that.
Yep.
So if I can just build something around Cam Johnson and Dario Saric for Satoransky, I'm willing to do that. We need a guard who is not young, not old. He's like in the prime years. He could be our sixth man. He could potentially replace Rubio as a starter if we need him to. He also would fit perfectly as a backup guard if, you know, LeCue turns out to be something, or, you know, if Ty Jerome's great or whatever. I just think that this guy could really help our core move forward the next year and a half. So I'm willing to give you Cam Johnson. I'm willing to give you Dario Saric. What do you think about that?
I'm not saying no to that. You know, as Chicago's GM, you're right. I don't think it's quite worked out how they hoped with Sato. They've got some other young guards in that position. And you're offering me a guy that was picked number 11, rightly or wrongly, in last year's draft. So another prospect that we can hold on to and hopefully build around. And we probably need a little bit of shooting in Chicago. So if that's the offer, you've probably got yourself a deal there, Max.
If Laurie Markkinen were healthy and like tradable, really, I think that's what I would absolutely go for, is the Sato Markkinen thing.
Yeah.
But I do want to just point out, the reason why I did this is, like, I just think, man, we overrate young players so much. I think Cam Johnson's going to be a fine player in the NBA. He could be a good player. But, like, I just think getting somebody who's, like, solid, and I know he's going to build the core for the next 5 years and help Booker and Ayton, I just think getting Satoransky would just help so much, David.
Let's say they are interested in Laurie and the Bulls, you know, are wanting to get off him, particularly with the injury, and we're kind of looking a little bit more long term. That maybe he was a long term goal of the Suns, and they're not so worried about the short term injury. What are you adding? You know, salary, and that's probably not an issue. I wouldn't imagine. You probably add a guy like Frank Kaminsky or something. But what are you willing to add on top of Cam Johnson to potentially get both guys in a trade, just out of interest?
Yeah, it's going to be maybe like a lottery protected first, maybe. Like I just think because then you're not only just getting Satoransky, who you're very very sure he could be your third guard, maybe even help start with Booker at times.
Yep.
You're also getting somebody with a lot of upside. He's still, like, I mean, listen, Laurie Markkinen is, 3 years younger than Cam Johnson? He's 7 feet tall. He shoots really, really well. I think it's close. He's not 3 years younger. He's 2 years younger. He's definitely younger.
Yeah.
And the dude is 7 feet tall. And listen, I think Cam Johnson's a better bet to shoot than Laurie Markkinen is. But Laurie Markkinen is a pretty good bet to shoot. He's 7 feet tall, too. Man, that's a lot of upside. And you're getting the sure thing in Sato.
Yeah, that's the cherry on top for me. I have a hard time at the moment comparing Laurie and Cam, just because Cam's done everything you ask of him coming in his first season, and Laurie's obviously a bit of a reclamation project, even though I do agree at their ceilings, Laurie's definitely the better player. But, you know, the fact that you're taking that punt plus getting a guy that you really need in Satoransky, I think it's probably a deal that the Suns should look at if it comes across their text messages or phone lines, Max.
It very likely won't. Although Satoransky is kind of the player James Jones likes if he were just like 4 inches taller.
And yeah, white, smart, not that athletic.
Exactly. Just needs to be a little taller, and then he'd be in on him. But how about you give me yours? You're James Jones now, David.
All right. Well, I kind of looked at the lay of the land a little bit, made some calls around, and you know, it's going to be a bit of a dud deadline because, you know, Charlotte is sitting in 12th, just 5 games back in the East standings from the playoffs, and Sacramento are 13th, 6 games back. Yep. So I think a lot of teams are still going to think that they can be buyers and make the playoffs. So that only leaves Golden State, Minnesota, Atlanta, Cleveland, the Knicks, and then maybe you could tempt Charlotte, Washington, who you mentioned before, Detroit, depending on which way they go, and maybe the Kings. So that's kind of our target group, I think, when you're looking at any of these realistic trades that the Suns might do. And, you know, I want to be a buyer. I don't want to completely contradict what I said before about, you know, not being worried about the playoffs. But I just think James Jones in particular really values competing as a development tool. So I think they can still add a couple of pieces and play the season out and improve the young guys and I guess make Devin Booker feel good about the end of the season. So I kind of want to back up point guard like you looked at, or maybe you just look at it as a third guard off the bench. And I'd love some more shooting at a big man position as well. And, I don't want to rant about this, but I've said it so many times, just the end of roster balance just sucks at the moment. They need to fix that up a little bit and not just have 4 or 5 guards that all play the same position at the end. So my plan is to make a few calls on what I can sell first and then maybe pull the trigger on a trade. So I'm going to call around to the Clippers, Denver, Boston, Miami, and Philly, Max. You're going to have to act on behalf of all of those.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you all a question. Are you willing to give me a future first or young prospect for an Aaron Baines rental for the playoffs?
Probably not a future first. I mean, I guess of those teams, I'm the most interested if I'm Boston because they need a center.
Mm-hmm.
But even there, a future first is tough. I mean, we don't know if he's going to be healthy. I like Aaron Baines. He's also played for us before. He's declined a little bit. I don't know. Future first is strong there, James Jones.
Yeah, and I just think that's where the line is for me as James Jones. If I can't get that, I'm not selling on Aaron Baines. So we'll move on from that really quickly. Call around the whole league, mostly playoff teams for Dario Saric. Is anyone willing to give me maybe a couple of seconds for Dario to kind of recoup some of our lost second-round picks going forward? Would anyone throw that out, do you think, Max?
I'm expanding the limits of my brain, trying to scan every single playoff team's power forward rotation. Maybe Houston. Houston just needs players that can play basketball. So maybe they would do something like that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, love throwing off fringe assets for guys that might help them make a one last run.
Let me ask you this though, David: do the Suns really want 2 seconds?
Yeah, well, I just think, we're hearing whispers that maybe Dario is not long for the Phoenix Suns, so you take what you can get, particularly if...
No, I agree. I want 2 seconds, David, but does James Jones want 2 seconds?
I think
he doesn't care about draft picks.
I think if I get a guy to start in Dario's spot with my big trade here, then I would do it, and I think James would too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
if you're doing this in combination with something else, then it totally makes sense.
Yeah, do a favor for the agent as well, because you've basically already made your mind up that Dario's not hanging around with your team. So
that makes sense.
Let's say that's possible if I can pull one of these trades off here. So first call, I'm going to call the Kings. So you're going to be Vlade here for me.
Okay.
I want Corey Joseph and Bielitsa, and I'm going to give you Tyler's expiring, and you can have either Dario yourself, if you're interested in him as a restricted free agent, and I'll throw in one of our own seconds, or I'll give you a protected first.
Well, first of all, fuck Luka Doncic's dad. I was going to say that to start. And then second, interesting. Bielika, I feel like I could sell this guy around the league, don't you mean? He's pretty good.
Yeah, but he's my prize for taking back Corey Joseph and saving you a little bit of money, Vlade, because I know you probably want to keep Bogdan around, and you're going to have, a Bagley extension coming up around the corner. I don't think Corey's really worked out there. You're probably not going to make the playoffs, so you have a look at Dario, another European player for you, and I'll give you a future lottery protected first as well for your troubles.
Okay, so that's very interesting. But can I ask you this? If you're not trying to do the Kojo thing, what would you trade for Bielika? I'm just giving you him. I don't want to trade Kojo.
Ooh, I would give you Dario and that protected first.
See, I think that's more interesting to me. I'm Sacramento. I don't care about Kojo's contract. It'll expire next year. I'm not going to sign a free agent.
Mm-hmm.
We suck. So Dario and a protected first for Bielika.
All right. Before I pull the trigger on that, I'm going to call the Hornets.
Okay.
I'm going to offer you Tyler and Dario again, or a second. If you're not interested in Dario, you can take a second instead. And I'd like Malik Monk and Marvin Williams.
See, this is one of those moments where if I was Charlotte, I would like to canvass the league and see if I could do better than that.
Yep.
I'm not sure that I could, though. I'm going to fast forward that. I don't think I could do better than that, honestly. I don't think Malik Monk is really impressing anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And Marvin Williams, he'll help the Suns, but he's not somebody contenders are obsessed with. So if I'm Charlotte, I'm saying yes to that. So you basically have to pick between the two deals.
Yeah, but I don't get Corey, which, isn't the end of the world, but that was definitely my target with that Kings trade, to get that third guard like in the mold of your Sato deal. But I think for future flexibility and stuff, and I do think this is a realistic thing that might happen. We might just see Tyler flipped for another expiring, which we might get to later with some other targets, Max. But yeah, all right, you can be MJ for a second, and we'll do the second deal. We've got Tyler. And do you want Dario or the second?
Oh, I think I'm in the Hornets. I want the second. I've had enough experience with tall, white power forwards.
Cheap shot at Frank Kaminsky there, who's staying on the Suns, at least for now. All right, so we're going to give you Tyler and a second for Malik Monk and Marvin Williams, which also means I'm going to have to make a roster cut. And unfortunately, hopefully there's not too many Carter stands listening. He's going to be the guy that gets waived by the Phoenix Suns to make way for this trade, Max.
I think that would make sense. Also, maybe Charlotte would just want Okobo in the trade. I don't know. Would that work money-wise?
Well, I'm waiving Carter, not Okobo, but I did have...
No, I was kind of thinking, no, you're right. No, you'd waive Javon, but I'm thinking now, I should have had, as Charlotte, I should have just said, hey, why don't you throw Okobo in? You're not going to want him anyway.
Well, that's interesting point, because I did have Ali as an option if you didn't want a second instead, but not both. So that's up to you.
I kind of feel like Okobo has much more value to Charlotte in this scenario than Phoenix. Is Phoenix going to not do that trade because Okobo's in it?
I wouldn't have thought so.
Yeah, no, I think you negotiated the perfect deal there. That's exactly what I would have done if it were you. But I just think I'm just mad at myself for not going after Okobo. That would have really made the deal good for Charlotte.
Yeah, getting off, I guess letting Malik Monk experiment go in Charlotte and maybe taking on a guy like Ali, which I could definitely see the Suns being totally fine with that, because as I mentioned before, they've got to make choices between some of these young guys at some point. And Ali's had his own bright spots this year, but you'd be going with Tiger Ohm and Jalen LeCue probably over guys like Javon Carter and Ali Okobo going forward, I think. So, yeah, interesting. But, I'm sure, we wanted to probably give a realistic lay of the land with our mocks here. But, some listeners probably would have hoped we went a little larger or some of the usual suspect names. So, Max, I thought we could play a quick game, just so we cover off most of the usual names that have been mentioned by Suns fans, at least from what I've seen. I've got them all listed down here, and I'll list them off for you. In kind of positions, and you can give me a likelihood rating out of 10 on whether you think that there's a chance the Suns land them, and then maybe pick one or two of your favorites potentially. You ready to do that?
Let's do it. I would definitely love to take LeBron James. Let's do that.
So at point guard, I think you mentioned it before, but Ish Smith earns $6 million next season. What's a likelihood of the Suns going after him?
I could see it. Ex-Sun, 7.
Okay. A guy who's mentioned quite a lot and just played against the Phoenix Suns, Dennis Schroeder, $15.5 million next year on his deal.
Well, did you see the Twitter video of Sam Presti and James Jones going behind the locker rooms? Yeah.
I did.
I think you
yes.
gotta give it a 9. That's spicy. Also, David, he was great. He's really good, David.
Yeah, I feel burnt by him because he's just been... a bit of a prick in the past and a bit of a sook. So I'm not sure how much, a guy like CP3 is keeping that in check and whether we'd see a different Dennis Schroeder, particularly with Ricky Rubio starting here in Phoenix.
I do want to give a quick tangent. I totally agree. And watching OKC, the game was tough. Obviously we lost. It wasn't fun. But man, how good is OKC? I love those guards. They have Schroeder, Paul, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, and now they have Lou Dort, ASU. All four of those guys are kind of fun and awesome.
They are. They've got, Presti's in a weird spot here. His probably natural inclination is to collect more assets, but he's got such a great chemistry going with this team. So they're definitely a team to watch.
And he also has all the assets already too.
So we'll end out point guards with a guy that has come up quite a bit, and I know you've mentioned a lot. Derrick Rose, $7.6 million next year he earns.
I don't want to hurt anybody listening. I know my own podcast partner here listening. I think Rose is he's probably the best guard on the market. And he's on a really good contract, so I kind of feel like someone's going to trade for him. I'll reveal who later, but An 8 maybe. I think the Suns are probably going to want him.
Do you think my reservations. Does he pass the stuff we heard earlier in the year about Monty Williams and the guys that he wants to keep around, though?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I really don't. I don't know if that's more about like just guys who are good in the locker room or guys who are good people.
Yeah.
I often don't know how that works.
Yeah, we just don't know. We guess mostly. Another Piston who's apparently just come on the market and therefore Suns fans have been talking about. He's probably the most recent one. Luke Kennard, $5.2 million end of his rookie deal next year.
Yeah, I saw that. I just don't know why the Pistons would be selling him to us for what? Like, what are they looking for there?
Yeah. So probably pretty low out of 10, I would imagine.
Yeah, probably like 3.
Alec Burks, Golden State Warriors, I think selling off whatever they can get. We saw that with Willie Cauley-Stein. He's only on $1.6 million for next year, I believe.
And the key phrase there is whatever they can get. Like, I think we could actually trade for him with like nothing, just like a second round pick and like nothing. So yeah, for sure, I think that makes sense. Like 7.
Dylan Brooks, we once tried to trade for him. He's a restricted free agent.
Would you trade him for Memphis? He looks awesome lately.
He sure does.
So, I don't know, 1? They're not trading
and
him.
A guy we've talked about quite a bit, Patty Mills, $13.2 million next year is the last year on his deal, Max.
I just don't, again, I don't know what they would trade him for from us, unless we really overpaid. And they're also making the playoffs, or trying to make the playoffs, so I don't think so.
Yeah. And we'll breeze through the bigs here, many of which we've talked about a lot. So I'll give you the contract and you can just give me a number and we can move on. Bobby Portis, team option next year.
2.
Serge Ibaka, expiring this year.
7.
Blake, 2 years left on his deal.
Griffin?
Yes.
Oh, I don't think he's tradable right now. He can't even play.
I agree. Just mentioning all the names we see out there. Kevin Love, 3 years.
3. This is no noise.
And we already spoke about Lauri Markkanen, so we can move on from him. But Aaron Gordon, 2 years left on his deal, and Suns fans talk about him a lot.
4. Just because he's the U of A tie, and also like Magic aren't refuting these rumors.
You pretty much answered this one, but Davis Bertans expiring. What number would you put on that?
I'm going to give it a 3, more than I said before, just because the Wizards have been kind of like sad lately. But like I think to retain him, David. Like, why wouldn't you?
I definitely agree with that. Gallo just played the Thunder, very similar to the Schroeder situation. He's an expiring.
They're not going to trade him. They're trying to be good.
Yep. And I've got to mention this guy, but I know what your answer is going to be. Karl Anthony Towns, who is on the full max.
God, I really, really, really wish, man. But I'm going to give that a negative.
So no small forwards in any of mine. Have I missed anyone that you've seen from Suns fans in my little group of usual suspects there, Max?
From Suns fans? That's interesting. I don't think so. Have Suns fans talked about Tristan Thompson at all?
I don't think I've seen it. You've definitely mentioned it before, but I haven't seen it from anybody else. So what likelihood do you want to put on that one?
Still pretty damn low.
Yeah.
I just thought he may be the only guy on my list they would pick. Maybe like a 3.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But maybe we should move to, I guess, some other ideas we're going to throw out there that Suns fans might not be thinking about or have talked about. But before we do that, we talked about them before, but, probably Saric, Baines, and Tyler are the most likely guys to go out of Phoenix unless a bigger deal gets done. I'm not sure if you think anyone else. We discussed Akobo. I think Kelly and Rubio are probably pretty safe unless we get completely blindsided by something. So, not much else going out other than those 3 guys. So, what's your price point of temptation? We kind of went through it in my exercise before with Baines and Saric. Do you differ? Would you take less on either of those 2 guys if you're James Jones or the GM of the Suns?
Interesting. I don't think mostly no, but I would say I would value the young guys who have shown absolutely nothing far less than we have in the past.
Yep.
Like, even like, absolutely nothing's too strong, but like Cam Johnson or Ty Jerome, I'm a big Ty Jerome fan, but like, if I can really substantially, truly upgrade, I'm just not going to value those guys who could easily wash out more than as much as I have in the past.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So Baines, he's a topic of discussion. I'm a little bit biased. I said it has to be a protected first versus all the, I guess, advantages for keeping him for the rest of the year and maybe bringing him back next season. Would you take a good second from a team? Particularly because we are missing seconds at the moment in the future.
I need a very clear reason to move on from Baines. I'm not moving on for no reason. Like, if it's the Golden State second from Dallas, I might do it because it's the first second.
Yep.
But other than that, not it has to be a really top second. I need something that I'm like really tangibly excited about because I do think he's helping off the court.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. Well, let's throw some final names out from a Suns perspective before we move on to general NBA. I've got quite a few ideas, but I'll let you start us off with something that you might have thought, Max.
Yeah, sure. So this is my favorite one, but I think that there's an interesting deal to be made with the Knicks.
Okay.
Taj Gibson as 9.8 this year, and then a team option. Another veteran guy who can like kind of show guys how to play, contribute on certain nights. And then Reggie Bullock adding in $4 million this year, $1 million guaranteed. So basically, you only have a $1 million guaranteed total. These guys next year.
Yep.
I mean, if Knicks are willing to just take Tyler Johnson, a future second, just to get something. I would do that. If I can get, or maybe even like a Kobo. Like if they're willing to take something I'm not that valuing that much, I would do that.
Yeah, Bullock's on my kind of, in my random good fits grouping, which Satoransky was in as well, which you've already listed off in your mock trade deadline. So, yeah, I would do a deal like that for sure. I think we're in a privileged position where, Tyler, as much as we praised him for his game against the Thunder today, he hasn't been a key piece of the rotation. So you could just try something.
Yep.
I've even got a group of just expirings for expirings here, 3. And I should preface all of this. A lot of this stuff, I'm not huge fans of the deals, but it's essentially a free shot, a lot of this stuff. So, a guy like Reggie Jackson.
Oh, David, you just stepped to mine. That is mine.
Ooh, I'll skip over him quickly then. Evan Turner even, just from a creation on the bench. And DJ Augustine, although I don't think the Magic would, throw him easily. But my other random good fits are Jeremy Lamb. Beasley's a restricted free agent with Denver. Maybe you could pry him away. My probable favorite that I'd really support is Joe Harris, who's on a $7 million deal before becoming a free agent. And, famously, Kyrie didn't list him in their core going forward. So maybe you could have him.
54 points tonight, by the way, Kyrie. He's pretty good.
Yes, that was unbelievable. He can say whatever he wants when he's shooting on that efficiency. But yeah, Jake Lehman's another one who I've just always loved. He's on a really cheap contract, so another big wing type guy. But let's go to your surprise one here, because it's not mine. We wondered whether our big trade might be equal to each other, but I'll let you talk about Reggie Jackson.
I was just going through all the teams, and it's just been so long where I've been just ignoring Reggie Jackson's because I just hated his contract. I was like, there's no way I would ever even pay attention to that guy. Then I realized him and Tyler Johnson are on like the same exact expiring deal right now.
Yep, just swap them over.
They're the exact same. So just like, why don't you swap them? You give Detroit like a shitty future second or something worthless, and they'll say, okay, I guess because we don't care about this guy anyway. And you just like see what Reggie Jackson's like for a little bit. Maybe he's just a big improvement.
Exactly. Yeah, I actually brought this up with the Locked On guys last week when I guested with them. Wanted to gauge their thoughts on a deal like that.
Yeah.
And the other thing I brought up is just cut and waive him if he's a dick or he sucks or he's complaining about his minutes. Like, it's literally a free hit, particularly because Tyler hasn't been a piece of the rotation. You're not robbing yourself of anything here.
I mean, if it's literally straight up, they would just be stupid as hell not to do that.
Yeah.
If it's like, I would even throw in like a tiny shitty asset. Like, as long as it's not a major asset or anything you actually care about, like, that's fine. Go ahead. Just try it.
Which the Suns, if recent history shows us they've been willing to do that kind of thing. That's how they've got no seconds.
That is exactly right. All right, now I'm excited to hear yours, David.
All right, I'm going to throw D'Lo out there. It's not my one, but it is another guy that a lot of people bring up. I just don't see any way in hell that's a deal at this trade deadline.
They didn't want to sign him last summer, guys. Why would they do that now?
And again, I've got to give the disclaimer. I don't love this trade. I'm more thinking about what the Suns might do, just with the little that we know so far about James Jones. But I'm calling Vlade Divac back, Max.
Okay, let me take the cigarette in my mouth. What's up?
Harrison Barnes earns 22, 20, 18. The Suns don't really have a power forward. We saw Kelly really struggle guarding a guy like Gallo today. I love the switch, just as a side note. I'm very much loving Bridges and Oubre starting. I think it was a worthwhile move.
Oh, yeah.
Let's say the Suns just don't think that they're a free agent player. They need a starting power forward they can count on. If you can get Harrison Barnes to just play defense, hit open shots, be a reliable guy, would this regime look at a trade like that using Tyler Johnson's contract if you're not throwing very much else in, and the Kings are basically just like Dallas did, jumping off the Harrison Barnes bandwagon.
I mean, David, you just giving me nightmares, man. you just fucking terrified me. Because this actually sounds like exactly what the Suns would do.
Right? I really felt like I was onto something here. Like, I don't love the deal and would probably end up having a emergency podcast absolutely killing the deal and then trying to talk ourselves into Harrison Barnes like I just have now. But, I'm pre-preparing because this just... I don't know. It just has Suns written all over it, Max.
It's the most Sunsy thing. The only thing that saves me is Harrison Barnes can't shoot threes, and Jones seems to care about that. Maybe that'll save us, but oh god, no. I have never even thought about that, even a little bit, and it sent a shiver down my spine, David.
That was the desired effect for you and all the listeners. But, championship pedigree, he's a starter in this league. I don't know. It just feels like if they are a little bit panicked or, not feeling great about their future cap spending and stuff, I just think that's one that could just come out of nowhere and shock everyone.
I'm just seeing 3,000 Scott Howard sarcastic tweets fly through my eyes right now. If they did that, David, it would lead to the four most devastatingly sarcastically angry years in Suns history.
Yep. And I got to say, I have heard that the Suns very much value their flexibility going forward and aren't going to do anything stupid. But, just when I thought about that, I had to throw it into the universe, A, to, send those tingles, as you said, but B, I would have kicked myself if it eventually happened and I didn't have proof of thinking about it being a possibility. But I will end on a positive or a slight positive. My pipe dream target would be PJ Tucker, and I've got a question for you. He earns $8.3 million this year. He started for the Houston Rockets today at center, and I believe they were the first team in donkey's years to only play guys 6'6" and under for their whole rotation in a game. He's non-guaranteed next year. Is that the worst player contract from a player's standpoint in the entire NBA, Max?
That is an incredibly bad contract. I have not scoured the league for this question because you just asked me it, but I mean, I'd be hard pressed to find one.
I think you would.
Wow.
It's just terrible for PJ, and we I believe got a report that they probably PJ's agent realized that was a really bad deal and tried to get an extension for PJ, and they declined and then extended Eric Gordon instead. So I don't know why this man is playing through nerve damage. We've seen it in Phoenix. He's an absolute psycho and gives everything on the court. But he's being too selfless here, I think, for what the franchise he's playing for has given him. And I would happily take him back in the desert, Max.
I mean, it would be a dream to get PJ Tucker back, man. My number one memory of him, I think I mentioned it on the podcast before, was the fact that he made us lose a tanking game in 2015, or maybe it was 2016. But whatever the year we traded to the Raptors, that's the only thing that I think about him. That's how broken I am. But yeah, PJ Tucker, love him.
Let's move to general NBA while we're talking about other, I guess, non-Suns teams. Do you want to start us off with something that you may be expecting? I think you alluded to it before, so it won't be a huge surprise. Sorry for stamping all over that one.
Yeah, he's a bad human, guys, but Derrick Rose is the best guard on the trade deadline right now pretty easily.
Yep.
So I think that one of these teams is going to trade for him, and I think the team that just seems obvious to me is Philadelphia. They could really use a punch like him. They don't really have anything like that. They just need somebody besides Simmons and Embiid who can kind of own a quarter by himself, and he'd be the guy.
Yep, and we matched up on this one. I'll just throw in teams I'd like to see make a move at this deadline. The Heat, the Sixers, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
The Brooklyn Nets with kind of one eye on KD and Kyrie next year. The Nuggets, I just think, they're playing very good ball, but, maybe just tempt yourself into making a move with some of your depth pieces and have a splash. And the Mavericks as well, who I think fit in a similar scenario. But a trade, you just mentioned him. Who says no to this? Kuzma, and you've got salary, maybe Boogie and Troy Daniels to fit the salary for Derrick Rose and Luke Kennard.
Wow, that's actually, I mean, that would, if that happened as a Lakers hater, I would not be pleased. Let's put it that way. It's a good trade for the Lakers.
Yeah, I mean, Rose wasn't very good with the Cavs when LeBron was there, but I think, very different situation, and he's a different player now. He's kind of been on two decent stretches with the Wolves and the Pistons now since then. So that's one that I could see, one that I'd love to see and that will never happen. I'd love to see Miami, Pat Riley, just, pull another one out of the woodwork that no one sees coming. And, Drew Holiday and Jimmy Butler with some of their young pieces in Florida would be awesome to see. But it sounds like, from all reports, they pushed it out today, Drew Holiday is staying in New Orleans, Max.
Drew Holiday and Jimmy Butler, I would be very tempted to take that team. Oh, and Bam Adebayo, I would be tempted to make that team go to the finals, dude.
Yeah, it would give Devin Booker and Suns fans nightmares with those two guys guarding and most teams, which is why, they'd be a hot favorite. But, Miami's one to watch for me. They don't have a lot of work or a lot to work with because of Pat Riley's, pretty poor off seasons before landing Jimmy Butler, I guess Bam coming on and then drafting Tyler Hero. But watch out for them at the deadline. If we don't have a dud deadline and someone does make a move, I'd be very surprised if it's not a team like the Miami Heat.
The only caveat I'll give them the Heat, because I totally agree with what you're saying, I think they think they're Giannis contenders.
Yes.
So they won't want to take money on for 2021. But if they can get guys who expire, I think they're 100% in.
Yep, I very much agree with you, and we can probably move on, I think, Max.
Yep. The only other guy I want to mention for the Suns, it's not going to happen, but it's just my guy that I really, really wish we would have gotten before, and it's kind of conceivable that things could go horribly. We could get him. Spencer Dinwiddie from the Nets.
Yes. Yep.
He's really, really, really good, and it would be a perfect fit with Booker. They'd be awesome together. And I kind of feel like if it just gets a little more south with him and that team, maybe it's possible.
I've always been a Dinwiddie fan. It was just, I guess looking at them and I alluded to it before, Brooklyn are probably going to want to add pieces to KD and Kyrie coming back. So, it's hard to see Phoenix having something for them, maybe picks or something that they can play with. But I'm a huge Spencer Dinwiddie fan. Which, did you see his quote and follow-up tweet earlier today, which I've got for you if you didn't, Max?
I saw he was mad about not getting... Oh, he won the skills challenge and didn't get invited back. I saw that, but read the rest of it.
Yeah, so they asked him if he expected to be voted an all-star, and he said, look at it like this. I won the skills challenge and didn't get invited back. What does that fucking say? And then he quote tweeted the quote and said, I'm Spencer Dinwiddie and I approve this message.
I did not see that.
I love Spencer Dinwiddie.
That's
I would be
amazing.
very, very happy if he was a Phoenix Sun.
I'd like to think, Dave, that if you and I were NBA athletes, that's how we would tweet.
He's great. I love him. But let's move on now, Max.
All right, you ready for 7 seconds or less, right? We're there?
We are there, and it's your turn to put me under the pump this week, I think.
It is. So we're going to talk about the first two questions about the trades we just did. So which player did we talk about the most in all these trade talks? The one that gets you the most excited if you were on the Suns?
For nostalgia purposes and the most, we can probably take it all the way back to free agency and things like that. You and I have been heavy on Tomas Satoransky for a long, long time, and it would just fill me with a little bit of faith for this front office if they pulled off a move like that, particularly versus some of the other bad moves we've just listed off. So I'd feel good about that one.
It's a great call. It's almost a better move. It's just how it makes you feel about James Jones and even the player himself.
Yep.
Okay, which player we talked about? We're going to exclude Derrick Rose for all the sad reasons. Which player we talked about would you least want on the Suns?
Harrison Barnes, after bringing that up and having everyone probably live tweeting at me when they listen to this of what a bad idea that is. But yeah, let's go with that. I'm not moving away from that. Yeah, that's my answer.
Oh man, the whole 4 years you have to live with that label. Which player was the most ridiculous to make it to the All-Star game? You can say East or West. We're getting rid of positions, David. Which player in either conference was the most ridiculous player to be above Devin Booker in an All-Star game?
I saw Nate Duncan tweet that Sabonis is the worst NBA All-Star in some time, which I thought was extremely harsh from Nate Duncan.
That was too harsh. Too harsh. He hates him.
I'm going to answer it this way. It's maybe not the best answer, but I was going to bring it up before in a conversation and we moved on to something else. I would have been really interested to see if Trae Young wasn't voted in by the fan vote as a starter, whether he would have made it over someone like Bradley Beal. So that's my answer, just to get that thought out there into the ether, Max.
That's a really good thought. I haven't seen that anywhere, but I think it's like a really insightful. I actually, when you say it that way, I don't think he would have been an all-star if the coaches were voting.
No, I would have loved to have seen it as a bit of a sliding doors moment for sure. So I think the fan vote got him in, and we missed a longer conversation around that, I suppose.
Yep, that would have been extremely interesting. He also, by the way, I think you probably saw Trey tweeted that he wanted Booker in. He was very mad about Booker not being in.
Yep, there's I think Sam Cooper of the Timeline podcast tweeted there's a whole pretty good team of NBA players that have come out in the last 24 hours and defended Devin Booker that would probably make the playoffs in its own right. So, shout out to any of those guys that had the balls to call it like it is.
And you can add the best receiver in the NFL, Michael Thomas from the Saints, also tweeted that the Booker thing was ridiculous. So,
love it.
I don't know. Apparently a bunch of players think he's good. I don't know. But I hope you think we're good. Please rate, review, and subscribe. My name is MaxMCC11 on Twitter. He is the 4-Point Play. David, anything else?
Max, we got a review. Andreas on January 27th, just a few days ago, said, I always try to save my podcast for when I'm driving, but I can never wait to listen to 7 seconds or less. As always, thank you guys for your dedication, even through some pretty toxic times on Suns Twitter. Keep up the great work, guys. I loved that review, and I'm glad that we could read out another one. And I'm excited for what the deadline might bring. So unless there's a big trade and that gets an emergency podcast out of it, we'll be back with a podcast next week, and like I said, up to 5 games depending on what day we decide to do the next recording. Max, we've got Milwaukee, Brooklyn, and Detroit away, and then Houston, I should say, and Denver at home. Big week. How many wins can you see there? I can probably only see maximum 2 off the top of my head, Max.
I think the last couple of weeks have said really good numbers, so I'm going to go with 5, David.
Love it. Love it. Great positive finish to the podcast.
One more positive finish. Just want to say there was actually one more review of us. It was from another podcast. I just got to say the other podcast, just please stop talking about us. We don't care. Leave us alone. David, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Max.